Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And I'm back today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
Hey, it was a good weekend. Well, just sort of. We had some bad news, but not me personally, but one of the members of our local EAA chapter died in a plane crash out in Illinois. So yeah,
Oh, that's terrible.
yeah, that
Yeah,
is yeah.
yeah, that is terrible information. All right, let's talk about the weight of electric vehicles. I know we talked about this, but you were saying you posted something on LinkedIn about this. So
Yeah, well,
tell
see,
us what happened.
you recall that I mentioned that a show or two ago about the fact that I had queried AI about, because people say, look, the problem is that these electric cars are so heavy, right? Because they got all that battery weight, and that leads to road wear and tire wear and so on. And so I got into a dialogue of responses with one of the AIs, and the result of that turned into this article about electric cars weighing less than a conventional internal combustion engine car. And I
Hmm.
ended up putting that on LinkedIn as well as a couple other places, as well as on EV World. And boy, did that generate responses, because everybody says, "Well, that's nuts. That's crazy. That's not. You got a car with a battery that weighs 1,000 pounds or more. How can that be lighter than an internal combustion engine?" And of course, that's right, because if you're looking at an electric car and you put it on a scale and you take something comparable and you put it on the same scale, they're going to weigh different. The electric
Hmm.
car is going to be 1,000 pounds, and the internal combustion engine, depending on how much fuel is in the fuel tank, is going to weigh considerably less, right? They're
Hmm.
typically anywhere from 30 to 50, roughly pounds, versus my Bolt, 900, I think it's 960 pounds. So obviously there's a difference. But what I continue to hope for people to understand is that, yes, at that moment in time, there is a considerable difference between the two. If you're taking two of them and they're driving over the same bridge, of course the EV is going to weigh more. But what I want to point out, the fact is that the weight of that EV of mine is never going to change. The
Hmm.
electrons in the battery are always going to weigh the same, right?
Right.
The gasoline that you're putting into that car, you consume it, you fill it up. 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 You keep going on. And at the end of a year, just 1 year, that battery or that fuel that you've used has weighs twice what my battery and my Bolt weighs. Twice. And every year after that, it's the same thing, year after year after year. Now, of course, driving over a bridge at any given moment in time, the one weighs more than the other. Yes. But when you take into consideration the long term environmental impact of burning that gasoline, moving that gasoline from wherever, refinery to your tank of your car, that will always keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, which is the greater environmental weight, right, between the two? The one where the weight of the car is always the same, or the one where the weight of the car always accumulatively gets more and more and more over years, right? So that's kind of the debate that's been going on. But it did stir some controversy,
Oh
and
yeah. You.
and for that, I'm grateful, and I appreciate everybody who jumped in. And the one that I don't understand, though, is the one gentleman who says, "How do you get 20 pounds of carbon dioxide from a couple pounds of gasoline?" Well, it's not a couple pounds of gasoline. A gallon of gasoline weighs 6.3 pounds.
Hmm.
But what we forget is that when you shoot that into the cylinder of an engine, you're shooting that and mixing it with outside air, right?
Mhm.
At a 15, generally a 15-to-1 ratio. For every little bit of fuel you squirt in that cylinder, you're putting 15 times the amount into that cylinder in air. And when you explode them, there's a chemical reaction that takes place and it ends up generating 19, basically just call it's like 19.83 pounds or something. Let's just call it 20 pounds. So yes, you create 20 pounds of CO2 by combining the air in the atmosphere and the fuel that came out of your fuel tank. So, and I wasn't even including that number in the weight of the car because obviously that gets into the atmosphere and does what carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to do. So anyway, I wanted to just clarify that for anybody who read that article or saw it on LinkedIn. Yes, they do weigh differently, but I'm thinking in terms of the cumulative effect over time that the weight gets more and more and more. Now we can argue till we're both blue in the face if that's a fair metric or not.
Right, because the CO2 doesn't wear down the road anymore.
No, no, oh no, and you
No,
can't, and you
yeah,
and you can't, and I didn't include that. That is not
no.
included in the article that I made. All I was talking about was the sheer weight. And when
Mhm.
you look at the weight of the amount of gas or oil that we pull from the ground and we turn into, whatever carbon byproducts or whatever hydrocarbon byproducts we're going to turn it into, is significantly more than all the batteries of all the EVs in the world right now. Will that go up? Yeah, it'll go up, but I don't know if it'll ever match the equivalent of the amount of oil that we have pumped, burned up, and turned into hydrocarbon in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide. So anyway, there we go. I said my
Yeah,
piece.
yeah. You've had a lot of engagement on that one.
There's
That's
been
a
a
really
lot of engagement. Yeah.
um no, but still, we look at the disingenuous thing. We keep going back to our local senator who claimed that EVs can weigh 3 times as much as gas cars. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, they could if you took an EV Hummer versus, say, a Toyota Corolla or something like that, you know. Um,
Well, hey, if you just look up the weight of a what is it? The Chevy Suburban. Compare
oh yeah.
the weight of the weight of a Chevy Suburban compared to my Chevrolet Bolt,
Mhm.
right? It weighs like 2.5 times what okay, it's a 7-passenger, whatever it is, car compared to 5 in mine, but it's like 2.5 times the weight.
Yeah, I know when I've had investors come over from New Zealand or Australia, they absolutely cannot believe how large
Oh yeah,
American vehicles are. That people are driving around in Suburbans and Tahoes and stuff like
one
that
one
when they don't
one
even have
person
vehicles that
generally.
size. Yeah, one person generally driving around in this enormous vehicle. I used to have a friend who drove a Suburban as his daily driver. And I'm like, why do you drive this thing, dude? I mean, you're not even a big guy. It'd be different if
Yeah,
you needed the
yeah.
bigger space because, I just like having lots of room in case I need it. It's like, geez,
And how
it's
many
like,
how many times did you? I mean, what are you planning on loading up the professional soccer team? Taking it to
yeah,
practice or
no, I mean,
anyway?
and
Yeah.
I think he did have 4 kids. Okay. So it was comfortable
Well,
for that.
okay.
But, that's, yeah, he was talking about a gas powered golf cart. Yeah. It certainly wasn't something heavy. That's for sure. She just didn't have her facts straight. If only she had access to the internet where she could have, done a little investigating and checked out to see what it was. So we got an article called "The Chevy Equinox EV is Selling Like Hotcakes."
Yeah.
So Chevrolet has moved into number 2 in the United States
Yep.
behind Tesla in sales of EVs. They beat let me see. Through May, GM had sold 37,000 EVs. Ford had sold 34,000 EVs. In the first quarter, Chevy became the fastest growing EV brand in the US, driven by strong demand for the Equinox. The Equinox was a third of all the EVs that GM sold. They sold 10,329 in the first quarter. It has solidified its position as the number 2 seller of EVs with 62,000 sold through May. So if they sold 30,000 the first quarter, they sold another 30,000 in the next 2 months. So they're even accelerating. Of course, I think right after tax season is when, cars typically sell well.
Right.
They have GM has 13 EV models now. That's impressive. Think about it. 5 years ago, there weren't 13 EV models in the United States.
A total between all of the OEMs.
Between all car makers.
Yeah.
So you've got the Chevy Equinox EV, the Chevy Silverado, the GMC Sierra, the GMC Hummer EVs, the Cadillac Lyriq, the Optiq, the Vistique, and the Escalade. Now, yeah, the Hummer probably counts for 2 because you have a pickup truck and an SUV.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Although it should probably count for 2 each of them, right? Because it's so big. But I was seeing an article where somebody was talking about the average efficiency of the GMC Sierra pickup truck is like 2.1 miles per kilowatt. It's really abysmal compared to a lot of EVs. Let's see, solar time. Of course, that myth is a distraction that we fill up our EVs with electrons. They imply that you need to buy a battery every time an EV needs a charge.
No, we don't. No, we don't fill up with electrons. We shift and move electrons between the cathode and the anode. That's all that's going on. Those electrons are always there, and we're just using electrical current to move them back and forth. You're not filling up with electrons. You're just moving them back and forth.
Oh. So May was the second best month ever for GM for EV sales. Let's see. In the first 2 months of 25, GM was around, share of the US EV market was around 15.5%, more than double that of the previous year. Wow. A dealer in California reached out to Electric, claiming Chevy could have sold even more, but they had to wait over 30 days for Equinox EV models.
And I think part of the reason too is because they don't have the Bolt anymore. I mean, I absolutely love, the difference between my Fiat 500e, which I love, and it's a fun car to drive, and the Bolt is not quite night and day, but dusk and dawn, right?
Yeah.
They did a fabulous job on that car, and if they kept making them, I'm sure they would have sold many more. But the next best bet then is to go to the Equinox. So
yes, all right. GM is narrowing the gap with Tesla not only in the U.S. but also in the North American market. The Equinox has been a hit so far, with the next gen Bolt due out later this year. GM's Chevy will likely see even more growth. Yeah. Mary Barra promises the new Chevy Bolt EV offers an even better driving, charging, and ownership experience. The charging is probably the big one because it's a really slow charging one on road trips.
Yeah, on road trips. I mean, let me just bring you up to speed here since we're talking about Bolts. When I bought that car, it was supposedly been charged up at the dealer and it showed 167 miles range, which really got me worried. I said, "Oh God, have I got a problem with the battery?" So I charged it up over the weekend, right? You know what my mileage estimate now? Now of course I've driven it, but when it came off the charge, 284 miles.
Wow.
284 miles range. So yeah, but then of course I'm a very efficient driver. I got at one point, for folks who kind of understand where this is going, you measure, instead of miles per gallon on an EV, you measure miles per kilowatt hour. And so I am at right now 5.3 miles per kilowatt hour, and I had it up as high as 5.5.
Yeah, but that's not normal, Bill. And your car only supposed to really get about 4.5. and you're just
By
really
the
exceeding.
year, the lifetime of the car, considering the previous owner, right,
Mhm.
is 3.7. But
Yeah, so
since the
you're
last,
vastly
so
beating
I'm really driving it as
efficiently.
efficiently as you possibly can, and I'm not slow or anything like that. I'm, cruising along like everybody else. But I think the difference is the use of the regenerative braking. Because all I got to do is just let up on the accelerator and the car slows down itself. Never have to touch the brake.
But you're not
Never.
driving back and forth to Lincoln either, where you're going 80
Well,
miles
no,
per
but
hour.
yeah, but I'm putting on 12, 20 miles every time I drive. So I mean, yeah, it's not a highway commute at this point, but I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I'm just saying you're excessively you know you're driving it at a very high standard of range. You know,
Yeah. Oh, I admit that. I
it's
mean,
just like
I'm even shocked by it.
it's just like we used to have the 55-mile-per-hour speed limits, which were in place for gas mileage. And if you actually drive a gas car at 55, it tends to be right about where it gets the best gas mileage. And
Well,
so,
yeah.
yeah, if you drive down, one of these two-lane highways where the speed limit isn't super high, you'll typically get the best highway gas mileage you ever get. You get on the freeway and you're driving
But
80, it
don't
doesn't
try
get
to
it.
drive between here and Lincoln at 55.
No, you'll get run off the road. No, no, our speed limit here is 75 for folks. So
Yeah,
those of you in some,
nobody follows that.
yeah. Um, let's see. The Equinox EV has leases starting as low as 289 per month. They also offer zero APR for 60 months on all 2025 EV models. So they're doing a lot. I mean, you know, the thing is talking about like Equinox EVs, Silverado EVs, Blazer EVs. The Blazer is a step up from the Equinox, but it's not, you don't really get much for, the change
Yeah.
moving up. All right. I found you this article from the India Times that I had sent you. Solar
Oh, the
surpasses,
solar. Yeah.
yeah. So solar surpasses nuclear for the first time, contributing 10% of global power in April 2025. So it's the first
Fantastic.
time that solar has ever passed up nuclear energy on the world stage. Now, I don't expect this to last long. So I suspect solar will probably keep pulling out ahead for the next 2, 3 years, and then nuclear will go shooting past it because in the early 2030s, you're just going to see a huge surge of nuclear energy in the whole
Yeah.
world.
Well, yeah, but that has to take into account, obviously, um, the fueling that goes into it, and what is the cost per kilowatt hour. The all the sort
Mhm.
of tangential costs that come into there. And the same thing applies to solar. I mean, solar is fine as long as the sun's shining, so we got to have solar backup. In fact, there's an article that I posted where, the I think it's called Clean Energy Foundation or something like that, are questioning the use of God, LOC, something like that, the local char, trying to calculate what the long-term cost is of electricity. Comparing that from the grid to solar, I'd have to go back and look.
Well,
But
I'm going to tell you. So, getting into the solar space, one of the things is that's a big issue is grid scale solar is really expensive to put in place, and it takes a long time to recoup that investment. It is price competitive with solar and wind, but the big advantage being that you have base load power all the time. Okay. But the SMR stuff that I'm doing more with is not really, it's more expensive than solar and wind. Okay, but the advantage is the location of where you're putting it right where the energy is needed, as opposed to having to deal with transmission costs or the fact that you can't get
right, yeah.
energy transmitted to those sites. So they all have their place, right?
Oh,
Solar,
absolutely.
there's no one energy source that's replacing everything else. That's just never
How
going to
did
happen.
Yeah, I mean, typically nuclear has been sort of viewed as a base power, base load,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, does was it small modular reactors, SMR?
Hmm.
I keep wanting to say SNR, small nuclear reactors, but
Right.
SMR.
Yeah.
So is that considered base? I assume that would be base loads. And how does that
It
match up to
is, but
local solar and wind and things like that?
um, the so there's a couple things. For starters, some SMR is actually trying to skirt some of the terms. So it's small modular reactors. The idea is that you can build the reactors somewhere and truck them
Right,
in. Some of
right,
them are larger than others. So
right.
when you start getting into ones like New Scale, just announced they have this. It's 77 um, megawatts reactors, and you can have up to 12 of them in one location. It's almost a gigawatt in
Okay,
one location. So gigawatt is still competing with the grid, right? I'd say grid scale reactor setup.
right.
So in your situation there, that's going to be price competitive with wind and solar. But the stuff I'm generally looking at is very small, like 20 to 40 megawatts. And this would
Right.
be for an isolated community that doesn't have access to the grid, that they're currently getting all of their power from either diesel generation, bunker fuel, or something like that.
Right.
That's not very is both is terribly expensive and non-energy efficient and extremely carbon emitting.
Yeah.
So you have kind of the worst of both worlds in their case. Um, Let me see if you want best speed.
Yeah. 17 miles an hour. Well, that's what I get on my bicycle.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, yeah, that's true. That 55 is where the sweet spot is for an internal combustion engine. In terms of efficiency, you go above that, and I think what are the term, a logarithmic? The curve begins to really steeply climb in terms of the drag that you're inducing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it all my driving is pretty well done here around locally. And when you look at the average miles average miles that you're driving a car, it's 20, I think it's like 25 miles per hour, something like
Hmm.
that by the time you include stop and go and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm close to the 17.
Yep, yep. Here's something kind of interesting. In China, this share, and this is just for April 25, the share of wind and solar combined was 26% of Chinese electricity production.
Yeah.
And considering China has a pretty big mix, I mean, they have way more hydroelectric than the United States. And they're getting up there in nuclear and some other spaces. That's a pretty big deal. Now, the United States combined solar, wind, geothermal, and hydro is like 24%.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, for all
Yeah,
of those
yeah. If you on
combined.
the average, obviously, because wind is the outlier here. Wind can be all over, can be anywhere from here locally. I'd have to look it up, but typically can be around, 6-10%, something like that. And then as high as 60%, or
Yep.
even as high as 80%. So it all depends. It's not a really fixed, stable number. It can be all over the graph.
Yep. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Renault. Not a company we talk about much because they're a European company
Yeah.
that doesn't sell in the US, but um,
Used to, but
yeah,
hadn't for a
used
long
to.
time.
Yeah, it just didn't work out that great in the US. Okay, so Renault makes really tiny cars. But they're not but they're doing different things. They have car sharing services, but they're also powering a small city in Europe. So
Yeah,
in the city of Utrecht in the
in the
Netherlands,
Netherlands. Yep.
um, they're using the Renault 5 EV. What's happening is The municipalities teamed up with companies called My Wheels, We Drive Solar, and Renault. They've debuted Europe's first large-scale vehicle-to-grid car-sharing service, which has been given the name Utrecht Energized. If it's successful, the scheme will stabilize the grid and offer residents of Utrecht a sustainable way of getting around the municipality. Now, the idea behind this vehicle-to-grid ecosystem is kind of simple. The Renaults store energy and then feed it back into the electrical grid during peak usage hours. Shared with the mobility services, it balances out the grid's usage, provides a sustainable way of getting around. The manufacturer announced the scheme back in November of last year, and it went live just this month. It's a sign of how far ahead the Netherlands is when it comes to solar and wind-based energy development. So what they're doing is they're using all this wind and solar, which obviously isn't consistent. It's not baseload power.
Right.
And they're storing it in the Renault cars,
Right.
and using that to power it back. And at the same time, you can rent these cars for like an hour or two,
Right.
and go out and tootle around and go where you need to go. These Renaults have a base price of equivalent US dollar 29,000. At the top end, they're 38,000. So they're not terribly expensive.
Yeah, they're pretty sporty looking too.
Yeah, they're not bad looking. Let
Yeah.
me see. Here is it's funny because it's got an image of one sitting in front of a windmill.
Right. Duh. It's the Netherlands.
Yeah. All right. What country are we in here?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all we need, are there any tulips in there anywhere?
No, I don't see any tulips. Yeah. That's really weird to think about how, what was it? The tulip industry was so valuable at one time.
Oh yeah, the tulip mania of the 1600s, early 1700s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyways, yes, that's what the car looks like.
It's sort of the crypto of its day.
Oh yeah. Let's see. But it'd be interesting to see how that stabilizes things. I mean, we've talked about this with the idea with like school buses and other large, vehicles with big batteries here in the States. There's a lot of different possibilities. Solar is 53% of new energy production in Arizona. I mean, I guess when you say new energy production, that means versus like LNG as being an increase. Yeah. Interesting stats. And I'm kind of wondering where solar is going to go if the solar tax credits are going away. So that's
now there's movement within the industry to get that posted. I think I posted 2 articles this morning that the industry is urging the Congress, don't take away the credits, please.
Yeah.
Not only does it obviously impact the price of, in fact, the article was entitled "High Energy Prices, Blame a Republican." That's the title of the article. They're concerned not only about the loss of the manufacturing jobs that's there, but it's also most of the impact, as we've discussed before, most of that impact is taking place in southern states, right?
Right.
The industry heads are saying, look, please don't take this away. We need this.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's definitely a lack of energy in the United States and the rest of the world because of AI and how much computing needs to take up some of this. But we're going to keep seeing, more growth in the need for electricity, and people having solar at home takes some of that burden off of the grid, right? But on the flip side, you got this issue. You got these big solar farms, and one of the articles that you had posted, the guy was talking about how solar and wind can come onto the grid much faster than LNG or nuclear. I mean, all the stuff I see in nuclear right now, new power really being generated in the United States. We're talking some in 2030, a little more in
Right.
31,
Takes time.
significant in 32 and 33. Um, and that's, you're talking 7, 8 years from now.
Yep.
And right now, there's lots of solar and wind that aren't connected to the grid yet because of bureaucratic red tape. And so there's like a 2 year backlog of projects trying to be added to the grid in some places. And a lot of it is they just don't have the
Just don't have the
transmission capable.
capacity. Yeah.
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 So there's a lot of reasons why that is. But yeah, it's tough when there are some solutions, but there's a lot of people out there that they particularly don't like wind. And when we're living in that wind belt, where we're at, and
Yeah.
obviously wind works well in this part of the country, and solar not as well, but it is here, but it doesn't work as well as wind. But solar works really well down in Texas and California,
Mm-hmm. And
and
Florida,
yeah, Florida, Arizona, all those places. I mean, it seems reasonable to me that if you're building homes in the Sun Belt, you should have solar on the roofs.
Yep.
But they're going to take away those incentives to make that part of the construction, and it's already hard enough to get people convinced to to take care of that. Wasn't it California? Didn't California have some of the new housing had to have solar on the roofs for a while?
Yeah, but they've been debating, because what's happened apparently is that California has passed some legislation that I think takes away some of the incentive to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't look too deeply into that, but there's been a lot of pushback on, what do you want us to use solar, but you're passing this legislation that discourages us from using solar. So of course, then utilities like in Florida, for example, have had pushback on that, because they don't want the grid to become a battery storage system for them. You
Right.
put up solar. So
One of the problems has been there's so much solar in California that it's actually too much as far as going back to the grid. It's more than what the grid can take. So that's been an issue too, and it's worked out a little too well.
And then you have battery storage plants like the one up near San Jose somewhere, catch fire and burn for several days. And so
Yeah. Well, they obviously need more battery solutions, or at least energy storage solutions to keep using that.
I don't think because what you want in that case, you don't want the Tesla batteries. For that, I think it would be better. You probably want something like the redox flow type battery, for handling grid type, community type solar. Putting in Tesla, battery backup for a home, well, makes a lot of sense. But I think they have to scale up to something like redox. And I don't think solar or redox batteries have the same problem with a combustion fire potential.
Yeah, but realistically, they need to have homes that are getting solar added need to have battery backups to go with it, so they can store some of their own energy instead of having it all go feed into the grid. We don't have that issue here because there's just not that much solar, but in California, they really need that. Let's see. But yeah, there was a couple of articles. There was a guy from NextEra Energy or Next Era Energy warns that building new natural gas generation nuclear plants will take too long. Wind and solar are quicker to add now. And they feel that the Republicans are trying to hurt domestic manufacturing in this regard. That's a interesting, argument. We can't afford to do that. If we do that, we'll lose the AI race, and we will bring the economic expansion in the United States to a screeching halt. Said Ketchum, whose FPL utility subsidiary is a power provider for President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Palm Beach, Florida. Uh, um, but so neither natural gas or nuclear plants will be able to meet the growing growth in demand until 2032 or later. So policy needs to help companies like his that can tap into a variety of energy sources. Our job is to get electrons on the grid. I don't care what flavor they are. It could be renewables, gas, or nuclear. I have to get electrons on the grid to accommodate all the demand that we see in this country and do it at a reasonable cost. They're the biggest. NextEra is the nation's biggest owner of natural gas-fired power plants and the world's leading generator of electricity from wind and solar power. So they're big in LNG and wind
Yeah.
and solar. Yeah.
I think, well, Berkshire is the same way, isn't it? I think Berkshire has not only all that wind, they don't have any solar that I know, but they do have a lot of wind. Obviously, all those turbines on the interstate to the east of us. Mid-American, which of course is a Berkshire-owned company, but they also do natural gas. So I think it would be prudent. Obviously, it's prudent to have both of those. And if I were managing, I'd obviously want to be personally moving closer and closer to renewables and further away from reliance on fossil fuels. And that appears to be what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, there seems to be. But anyways, well, let's move on to Volkswagen. So Volkswagen is bringing up something called its Scalable Systems Platform.
SPP,
It's a
SSP.
SSP, new electrified powertrain setup designed to underpin the next generation of Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche EVs. It should be ready by now, had a delay due to reported issues with its software division, Cariad, which eventually led VW to turn to Rivian for a new partnership in developing future software for Volkswagen models. Now VW has reportedly locked down the engineering plan for the new chassis, and there's a bit of a surprise. It's tailored by each brand for each model. It's been reported that VW is planning on developing at least 8 platform derivatives based on the SSP, ranging from compact models, sedans, SUVs, and sports cars. It's said to now be working with partners like Rivian and new suppliers to bring the new models to market. But the surprise is they may not all be fully electric as was initially assumed.
Extended range hybrids.
Yeah, that's such a weird word.
Yeah.
So they'll follow the trend of developing a range extended hybrid setup out of the new SSP, where a gas engine will act as a generator unit to power up the large battery pack that sends energy to the electric motors that drive the vehicle's wheels. It's similar to extended range electric vehicles, EREVs, in development by Ram, Nissan, Scout, Genesis, and more. No further details or prospective models were pitched as future Volkswagen EREVs yet. The next generation Volkswagen Golf has already been confirmed to go fully electric, but those plans could shift now that the platform has the capability of offering alternatives. VW does plan on keeping the current gas Golf around through 2030, alongside the introduction of the new Golf EV. They'd probably be really welcomed here in the United States, because it seems like there's so many people who really like the idea of plug-in hybrids as their solution, and
or that they don't have to plug in at all. It's a conversation I had last night with one of the local members of our EAA chapter. He drives up just ahead of me in a brand new 2025 Tesla Model 3, right?
Mhm.
And so he's talking about, well, I always talk, how do you like it, right? So he's telling me that his cost for the car, he's able to charge the car at work, right, for free. So obviously he really likes driving this, this car. He says, yeah, it's costing. He says, it would be dumb for me not to do this. I can buy this car, or whether he's buying or leasing, I'm not quite sure. He said, but it's like think he said he's paying like 200, something under $230
Hmm.
a month, right, for a brand new Tesla Model 3.
Three.
And his company's letting him charge it for free, right? Which is really a good deal. So that, again, just a little aside, that one of the reasons why, if you don't have an EV, you really ought to seriously look at, and even if you don't have a garage, maybe your company will let
Let's
you
charge at
charge
work.
it up at work. Yeah.
No, that's obviously a big opportunity for a lot of spots, for a lot of different places. All right, so let's talk about Tesla insurance. So apparently
Yeah.
Tesla is trying to provide car insurance to keep the cost down for EVs, but they're losing money on this. And for years, Tesla Insurance promised lower costs by leaning into what the company claimed was a unique advantage: real-time driving data and deep familiarity with its own cars. But new reports suggest those ambitions may be unraveling. Insurance costs for Tesla owners already are high. This development could make EV ownership even less affordable for everyday consumers. According to S&P Global, Tesla Insurance reported a loss ratio of 92.5%.
Ouch.
Yeah. So it means that they paid out 92.5 cents in claims for every dollar it brought in through premiums. Once overhead costs are added, that suggests they're likely losing money on its insurance program. They brought this out in 2019 to help bring down notoriously high premiums for its vehicles. It leaned on its features like autopilot and real-time safety scores to personalize rates. Tesla owners have mixed reviews, with some struggling to secure better quotes than they get elsewhere. Excuse me. Excuse me. This report contradicts Tesla's repeated claims that vehicles are less likely to crash and cheaper to repair. If that were the case, the insurance program would be thriving, not floundering.
Yeah, the cheaper to repair thing is apparently is a myth. Doesn't take much damage to a Tesla to get the insurance company to write it off.
No, it
Um,
doesn't. It doesn't.
yeah,
Um, let's see. Yeah, but they don't ever actually give any actual data saying that insurance prices for Teslas are increasing. They just say it likely will.
yeah. Well, yeah, you'd like to see, what is it, right? What is it if you're insuring a comparable sedan, right, gas-powered sedan to a Tesla? What is your rate there? And of course that depends on the insurance company.
Mhm.
Um, so that's and it's probably a fair criticism. One of the people says that one of the drawbacks of owning hidden costs of owning
Mhm.
an electric vehicle is the price of the insurance.
Yes.
So in this particular case, from what I've heard, at least, that once you damage, if there's any kind of extensive, even minor damage, really, to a Tesla, can be pretty dadgum expensive, and that can be a disincentive for people. So they obviously need to tackle it. How's Tesla going to deal with this? Well, probably have to raise premiums and hopefully figure out how to get them repaired and teach others how to repair them for less money.
All right. You had another article about Tesla stock and the impact of the robo-taxi launch. Let's see. So the theory is, this didn't actually come from Tesla. It's Bloomberg says that they expect robo-taxi to actually begin, or I'm sorry, Tuber to begin on Thursday.
Uber, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I like
Um,
that.
yeah, it is funny, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
the potato of
right. Okay, if you hadn't listened before, we decided that we wanted to create a hashtag, right?
yes.
For this thing, because they haven't. Oh, thank you. There we go. They can't copyright robotaxi, and they can't copyright cybercab. or cyber taxi, whatever.
Yeah.
So Dave, were you the one that came up with
Yeah.
Tuber?
Yeah.
Anyway,
This was my thing.
yeah. So
Yeah. I'm going to call it tuber.
Tuber,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. People are going to know exactly what I'm talking about.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
when I put the T on there, they're going to know it's Tesla.
Sure.
You know,
And particularly if it's a Tesla T, right?
yeah. Yeah. Um, anyways, um, yeah. So I think we'll see some more growth as soon as this actually starts. You'll see some more growth in the Tesla stock. Um, it's hard to say. I mean, the conclusion of your AI thing was that robotaxi launch could prove pivotal for the company's stock as it seeks to regain momentum. I mean, their stock's going to continue to improve over the years because they've got so many things going on in the field of, autonomous vehicles, robotics, all of that. People like to just focus on the cars, and it's really not enough.
They've got
Coincidentally, I've been wondering if the protesters over in LA, when they keep burning Waymos, if they realize those aren't Teslas.
I would have. Well, who knows?
Yeah,
Who
maybe
knows?
they know, maybe they don't.
Some people some people just aren't deep enough into the mire here or in the swamp like us that we can recognize the difference. That in all likelihood, those are probably British-made Jaguars, right, running
Yeah.
around there. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's just really crazy to think. It was like in one picture there was 4 of those things destroyed.
I would like to ask listeners to comment below. Will the Tesla cyber cab, whatever robo-taxi thing, will that be a success in the long run? I'd love to hear, what readers are thinking. I personally have my doubts,
Really?
but oh yeah, I'm not sure that America's ready for that. But then again, I'll likely be wrong. Like I was on the weight of an EV, right?
There you go.
I'm willing to learn. So if you think that the Tesla, cyber truck, cyber cab, whatever it's going to end up being called, if you think Tuber is going to be a success or a failure, comment below. I'd love to see them.
Yeah, Waymo is certainly spending a lot more money on the LiDAR and all those things to make it safe and all that. It's to be seen how well this really plays out for Tesla. I think for Tesla, it's going to have to be very similar to what Waymo's doing and be on controlled routes. And so it's not going to still completely replace like Uber and Lyft, because it's going to be, those specific.
Yeah, what I saw today is that they believe that, initially these are all going to be driven by remote drivers, or at least overseen by remote drivers.
The same way that Waymo is
in Austin. Yeah.
So that was how Waymo started out, right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
A human could take over. And I really wouldn't be surprised if you don't see that with Uber as well.
I think that would be prudent,
Yeah.
If I were in the seat there, let's have some guys kind of sitting at monitors and being able. Now, what that involves? Do they have joysticks, or do they have, like in a video game, you've got a real steering wheel? I mean, punch this button, I'm in control of this car, and then punch that button or touch the screen, and then I'm, what? I don't know. Or whether he just hits a button, or hits something on the screen and it brings the car to a safe halt somewhere.
Well, I guess the real thing is, how much can it really bring down the cost of taking, trips? I mean,
right.
And can it really be safer, more energy efficient? There's all these things. It's like,
And does it reduce congestion? Right.
Yeah,
Because there was debate, 10 years ago about this whole robo car thing, and that it would not, in effect, reduce congestion.
No, because if more people are, if it becomes really affordable and more people are taking it rather than taking the subway or the bus,
Right.
then it's going to increase congestion.
Yep.
So it just, but once again, it depends on how the economics play out, right?
Yep.
You know, but anyways, all right. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for listening to Bill and I rant along about the electric vehicle news. And I'll be back with engineer Mike Herzog tomorrow, and Bill and I will be back on Thursday. Otherwise, folks, have a great day.